Welcome to Morbid Mentality. I'm new to YouTube, and I'm so excited to finally be here. I've been wanting to start this journey for a while, and I can't wait to find a community of people with interests similar to mine. If you're into the strange, the dark, the unsettling, or just fascinated by the morbid side of life, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay updated on all the exciting content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and welcome to Morbid Mentality. Let's get into it. Today, we're diving into 3 skin-crawling stalking stories pulled straight from Reddit. These real-life encounters are disturbing, eerie, and guaranteed to make you look over your shoulder. So grab a blanket, get comfy, and maybe double-check that your doors are locked, because these stories are chilling. I hope you enjoy them. Story 1. I found a letter from my stalker. I found this note, nailed onto a tree on my front lawn. I don't know how to describe it. I'll just let you read it yourself. I saw you today. It was your birthday. You didn't see me. You hardly ever do these days. Your skin looked so nice and healthy, and your eyes, they were the most beautiful I'd ever seen them. You've grown so much. I remember how you used to look when you were younger. I remember the day I first met you. It was 4 years ago. I was sitting on my desk, head down, listening to the teacher rattling off names for attendance. The teacher called out a name I didn't recognize, and a stranger's voice answered behind me. Was there a new student? The teacher didn't pause for a second, just continued calling out name after name. I turned my head to where the voice had come from. I saw you, a pale thing, so thin, your eyes so red, at a seat that should have been empty. I saw the fireflies flying around you, flickering, dozens of them, never straying far from you. I saw them going through you and coming out through your skin, like you were a mist to them. Can you believe I thought you were a ghost? No one else seemed to acknowledge the new stranger sitting at the back of the class. Class after class, hour after hour passed as I waited for something to happen, for someone to notice you, for you to leave, for you to let out a ghoulish scream and claw at me like in the horror story I was certain I was in. But nothing happened. Teachers came and went. My classmates laughed and slept, and you just sat there. The bell rang for recess. The other kids ran to their mundanities for the day, leaving me and you together in the empty classroom. You stood up and pulled a chair from the desk next to you, making it face your desk. You turned your head to me and spoke. Well, you're slow today. Come on, ask me your questions. I don't know why I didn't run away screaming at that moment. Probably would have turned out better for me in the long run, but let's not speculate. I guess, at that point in my life, I was pretty happy lonely. I figured there was only a 50-50 chance you'd eat me, and the other 50 was that someone wanted to talk with me. Kid priorities don't make sense to me either these days. So I went along with the flow. I walked over to your desk, sat down on the chair you pulled for me, and asked my question. What were you? You told me you didn't know. You said that once you were a child, just like me, with parents and friends. You used to go to the same schools as me. Then, one day, one ordinary day, when you were 10, you just woke up, and you were like this, covered in fireflies, and no one could remember you the moment they concentrated on anything else. No one, not even your parents. You told me of how I'd notice you, every day, how I'd think of you until recess every day, how I'd come to you every day, how we would talk every day, how we would meet for the first time every day for the last 3 years, about how I'd forget the instant I walked out of the room, how everyone would forget you, how the fireflies would make them, how for the last 3 years you'd been alone. Your story was very hard to believe, so I didn't. I asked what reality prank show I was on. You looked, well, unimpressed, and asked me to continue telling my story. I was caught off guard by the non sequitur. You said last time I was here, I was telling you a story, a horror story about a haunted house. As you detailed the story, goosebumps prickled my skin. It was a story I'd been making up in my head, a story I hadn't told anyone yet. At that moment, A million reactions were open to me, all simultaneously adequate and inadequate. But the only thing that seemed proper was to finish the story for you. So I did. Halfway through, you interrupted me to ask if my mother HD recovered from her sickness yet. I had to shake my head, a bit ashamed at the fact that I shared this private matter with a stranger. The story ended a few minutes before recess. My next class was in another room. You told me to go. Your steadiness took me back. You seemed so accepting of your fate. Like you'd already gotten used to the idea of being forgotten forever. I was a kid back then. I wasn't a particularly smart kid, and I was probably at the onset of a crush. So you can excuse what I did next as an example of my childhood stupidity. I grabbed my scissors. Letter by letter, I carved your name onto my arm. Just so you know, I don't regret that. Don't get me wrong. Kid power might have made me do it, but it sure as hell didn't make the pain go away. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But even then, as a kid, I thought what was happening to you was unfair. I remember how your eyes looked when you saw that. The confusion, how strange it was for you, that anyone would want to remember. I remember that look so clearly. When I woke up the next day and saw your name on my arm, I remembered you. I didn't forget. That day, for the first time, we had a conversation that wasn't so one-sided. You said no one had ever done anything like that before, and suggested I might have a mental illness. I won't deny it. That drew a little blood. As we talked, a creeping thought came into my head. Did you prefer it when I didn't remember? That night, I was sitting up on my bed, staring at your name on my arm, wondering if I should cover it up so I couldn't see it and give you back your privacy, when I heard a crash. I looked up to see my bedroom window shattered and a dirty rock on my floor. I looked out of the cracked window to see a dark figure on my lawn. You were outside yelling about how we should hang out. It took me a while to get used to how bad you were at talking to people. Years without practice made you quite a bit rusty. That was all right. We had a lot of time. For the next 2 years, we spent the most of our free time together. Most of the time, we talked. You'd tell me an aspect of your life and how you lived. You still stayed in your old house. Your parents never noticed the food gone missing, never noticed the extra room, and you'd stolen the extra keys. One night, I confided in you that I was beginning to think you were a part of my imagination, Fight Club style. After all, what could you do to me that I couldn't do to myself? You spend the next month or so trying to leave bite marks on my ear or neck to prove a point. I still have some on my ear, so I guess you did. Looking back, I could see the warning signs even then. Your skin seemed to get worse and worse, paler and paler, and you'd rub your eyes raw. It was in winter we had our wake-up call. The morning began like any other. I woke up, brushed my teeth, and started searching for clothes to wear. It was a winter morning, and my room was dark, so I didn't see your name on my arm. The cold sent shivers through my body and pulled out a long sleeve jacket. A small bell rang in my head. Don't you usually roll your sleeves up? Yeah, and why did I? That L I finished tidying up and headed to school. On the school bus, I felt oddly content, like something I'd been worrying about had just disappeared. I walked up the school stairs, down the hall, through my class door, and sat down on my desk. The same feeling of a burden forgotten hounded my mind. What was I forgetting? When recess came, I just sat at my desk while my classmates ran out. It felt like a ritual, but I didn't know what for. I was contemplating just walking out to join them when I heard it. It was something small in the wind, like a whisper, but it came over and over, incessant. It sounded like my name. I knew this was strange, that this was worth my attention, but I felt oddly calm. Everything would be all right. Everything would be fine. Just ignore it. I sat there on my desk, my mind a war zone between two conflicting, contradictory voices, when I felt a force tugging on my sleeve. The moment I noticed this, my jacket sleeve tore open. I saw your name on my arm, and then your hand that had ripped my jacket open. You'd been yelling at me for over 20 minutes. I think that was the moment we realized how on edge our friendship really was. One accident away from complete erasure. We spent the most of the next year in the town library together, trying to find out what the fireflies were. It wasn't really a problem for me. Because of my mother's treatment, my family couldn't afford to go on any trips, and our house didn't have heating anymore, so I was happy to spend my time with you. Trying to find information was a puzzle in and of itself. After all, how would I read about people I couldn't remember? And how would you find out who was special when no one could even remember enough about them to record them? We found out old family trees and records. Individually, we'd write down the name of everyone in the book on 2 lists, and then we would compare. The names I hadn't remembered to write down, but you had, would become the focus. They were the names who were under the curse of the fireflies. We compiled a list of suspicious books. Books we thought could help us, because they were written by or were about the people we were searching for. I'd read the books, with the list of names side by side, reading it again for every page of the book. You'd shore the internet on the library computers for articles about the people. Our search would lead us to the first glimpse we got of what was really happening to you. It was late at night when you found the picture. I was a bit drowsy at that time, and almost about to nod off when I heard a sharp intake of breath. I turned to see you standing up. Pointing at the screen, I didn't see anything. Well, anything noteworthy. On the screen was a picture of a clearing somewhere in the woods. You held up your piece of paper where you'd marked out 2 names. Susie Appleby Reagan, 13. Terry Appleby Reagan, 12 siblings. For a moment, I saw the paper and the screen side by side, and then I saw them. 2 figures, emerging from the woods, towards the camera. They were almost humanoid, but all 5 limbs stretched to nightmarish proportions. Blank, white skin, pure albin that looked more like tree bark than anything on a mammal. A cloud of fireflies surrounded the duo. The shorter one looked emaciated. I could see the rib cages around which their eyes. God, their eyes. So small, so red. The longer one with their white hair didn't look alive anymore. They were just skin wrapped around skeletons. Their empty eye sockets had fireflies swarming out of them, both reaching for the cameraman. I looked at the article surrounding the picture. It was a blog post by Hiker, 20 years after the 2 kids had been written about last. The picture was a mystery to the cameraman as well. He'd been wanting to go to the woods pictured for a while now, but he never actually remembered going there. The picture had just appeared in his camera one day, out the blue. For a moment, I looked at your face. Your thin, pale face, with those red, veined eyes. Would that be you, when my scar faded? Just a walking horror I'd glimpse, then forget. We worked through our reading list at a much faster pace starting from that moment. Maybe we should have gone slower. At least every book, every website we'd left untouched promised hope. The books we finished and tossed aside promised nothing but the clearing in the woods as your future. And we tossed aside a lot of books. I believe I tore through 3/4 of my reading list before I stumbled across the journal. Oh God, that horrible, horrible journal. The journal used to belong to a mental patient named Joey, who claimed to be a serial killer. He was locked up in an asylum when the police discovered his supposed victims never existed. He was diagnosed with a need for attention and shoved away. They should have electrocuted him. They should have fried him until his flesh melted and his hair burned. In the journal, he talked about how he carried out his killings. He knew things, bizarre and disturbing things no one else knew. He knew of strange creatures that lived in the woods. Of them, his favorite were the fireflies. I'm not going to tell you how he summoned these things. I trust you. I trust you more than anyone. But a thing like this belongs to the ground more than it ever will to the human mind. It's sufficient enough to know that these things were not fireflies. Joey would start his ritual by taking a kid, anyone he'd liked. He could take them at any time, the dead of night in their own homes, or in broad daylight on their front yards. It didn't matter if he was seen. He'd take them to his house and drag them to a room. Usually, an Amber Alert came up around now. He didn't care. Like I said, it wouldn't matter soon. He'd drag them to a special room in his house. Here, the fireflies would come and latch onto them. Now, nobody was searching for the kids. Not the police. Not the parents. Nobody. From then on, He could do whatever he wanted to the kid. He'd get bored of them after a day or two, after the child had broken, and then the kid would go too. Hacksaw, kitchen knife, anything would work. He detailed a large pit of bodies he kept in the woods, swarming with the bugs. I guess he got bored of that too one day. So one day, he went right to the police station and turned himself in. Not of guilt. No. He just wanted someone to know about the stuff he was doing. Sick fuck. Oh, don't get the wrong idea. He never stopped killing kids. The asylum doors didn't stop him from doing what he liked. It just made him improvise. He made a new way. He modified the flies so they could survive without a host, just in a dormant state. When a child, he specified the age, would approach the swarm, it would latch on and begin its effect. Over the years, the child would warp horribly into the things we saw in the woods. I wish I could hate him in peace. I wish I could say the world owed him nothing. But that wouldn't be true. He detailed a way out. On the final page was an exact explanation on how to get rid of the fireflies. You must have seen something in my face. At that moment you asked. If had I found anything, I said no, and closed the book. A few minutes later, you shut down the computer. You picked up the last book and went through it yourself. When you reached the end cover, you tossed it aside. I asked what we should do now. You said it was all right. I could go home. We'd talk about it in the morning. I stood up and walked past the shelves of books. I headed for the library entrance, but stopped right outside the door and waited. I waited until I heard the sniffling sounds. I sneaked back to our table, where you were quietly sobbing. You had your head in your hands. I sat back down as you raised your eyes to me. You said you wished you'd never met me. How happy you were when you had nothing to lose. How I ruined your life. You'd never really gotten better at talking to people. That was the worst love confession I'd ever heard. I remember how we kissed that night. I remember your hands gripping my hair. I remember that kiss. I wish it could have been just a kiss. I'm sorry I ruined that moment. When my arms were around you, I was close enough to steal a firefly without you noticing. I remember holding the fireflies in my hand. I remember how it struggled, until it didn't. Until it was a part of me. The fireflies shifted. They came over me and left you. I remember the familiar look in your eyes, the confusion. I never wanted to see that confusion in your eyes again. You deserved to be loved, and you deserved to know that. I wasn't living anyway. You reached for me. I pulled away, as the last lights of recognition faded from your eyes. And then, you were just staring at a stranger, walking away into a crowd of strangers. That was a year ago. You've gotten so much better since then. You have so many friends now. So many people at your birthday party. You also look so much healthier. I haven't been as fortunate. My skin's gotten a lot paler, and my eyes hurt all the time now. I couldn't go to school like you did all those years. I haven't wasted my time, though. I found Joey's pit, the bodies. There were so many bodies. There's a grave for them now. Without me, my mom could not afford her surgery. She looked so happy. Just yesterday, I saw her playing with my baby brother. I saw you crying yesterday. You were with your friends, laughing. For a brief moment, your eyes met mine, and then they were so wet. I think I'm going away. For good, I think. You're not going to be happy if I stick around. I'm so happy I met you, even if you don't remember me. Note end. Sometimes I go through depressive episodes. I feel so lonely, even with my friends. I don't know what was going through my head during these times, and sometimes I'd end up in a bathtub. Until now, I thought I was cutting. I wasn't. The cuts, they're letters. I've been carving a name onto my arm. Story 2. I think these regular customers are stalking me. I'm a 19-year-old girl, and I work as a waitress at a small local restaurant in the town where I'm currently at university studying. The job is supposed to help me gain some work ethic, and more importantly, money, while I'm away from home. Anyone who's worked in the service industry knows how it can be. Much longer hours than you're contracted, being called in at the last minute, awful customers, and even worse managers. It wasn't always bad, but it certainly wasn't often good. I hated the job itself, but without it, I could barely afford to eat. let alone go out and socialize. The people I worked with made it bearable. Worries K became my social life. I missed home a lot. I grew up in a beautiful home with a wonderful family. My mom and dad were so perfect. They were like catalog parents. They both worked in medicine. My dad was a doctor, and my mom was a surgeon. They were both fit, healthy, and loving. My little sister was 16 and looked different to me. She had olive skin and darker hair that flowed down her back, while my unruly blonde curls stopped at my shoulders. People were often surprised we were sisters, but once we interacted, you could tell we were related. No one had ever seen sisters so close. We were friends. Most siblings I knew fought constantly, but not me and my sister. We were blessed with a great relationship. I guess all the privileges I'd grown up with had hit me when I arrived at uni. I made friends with so many people from diverse backgrounds and realized just how blind to the world I was. I'd sailed there, while others had almost worked themselves to death, just to get a chance. Seeing how easy I had it in comparison made me feel like an entitled brat. I got the waiting job to try and learn to function on my own. I even called my parents and told them to stop sending me money. I was determined to be independent. My friend Cassie worked there, and it was nice to work with a friend. We could rant about rough shifts and shitty customers together. And Cassie mostly worked the night shift. We would start at 5 p.m., and the restaurant closed at around 11 p.m., depending on how many customers decided to stick around after the official 10:30 close. We would stay to mop the floors and clean down the seating area. We got tons of abuse on the night shift. People tend to get more drunk during the dinner rush and love to take it out on their waitress. Don't get me wrong, not all customers are assholes, but the assholes stand out. It was worth it for the generous drunk tips, though. Kezi got it worse than me, due to her Tanzanian heritage. She had one regular customer who made the same awful slave joke, and she delivered his food every time. The manager never did a damn thing, and the owners were never around. The guy left a huge tip, but was a blazing racist who made her cringe every time she saw him in her section. We'd gotten used to it. After I had a guy ask if my private parts were on the menu in front of his children, I didn't think it would be possible to feel too uncomfortable with a customer again. I was desensitized. Then around 4 to 5 months ago, that changed. A man was seated in my section. He was dining alone, and I always try to make some effort to make single diners feel special. They're often sweet and seem to never really cause a fuss. I walked up to his table, ready to take his drinks order. I could feel him staring at me across the small restaurant as I approached his table. He was middle-aged, probably around the same age as my parents. He looked disheveled, with his hair a little tufty and unkempt. He wore a pair of glasses that were slightly wonky and had stains on his tattered jacket. And he didn't once break his stare. His eyes were on me the entire time. The closer I got, the more uncomfortable it made me feel. He didn't look happy, yet at the same time he did. He just kept staring, with this strange expression on his face. He looked at me like I was some sort of deity in the flesh. I asked him what he would like, remaining friendly and professional, but decided not to interact too heavily. Something about this guy gave me the creeps. He ordered a bottle of dry white wine, and I knew I was in this for the long haul. I delivered his bottle and poured out the first glass as he continued to stare at me with the same strange expression. In normal circumstances, in the real world, I would have asked what his problem was. But this was work. He was relatively quiet, and I needed a good tip to pay for a festival ticket. I took his starter order and walked away to serve my other tables. Every customer I interacted with blended into one. The only thing I noticed all night was that this guy was staring at me the entire time. As I delivered his food, he ate. I waited at other tables and walked the floor doing my job. I found myself venturing into the kitchen to escape his gaze. The chefs laughed at me. They said that I'd just found myself a new boyfriend. The more freaked out I got, the funnier they found it. But something about it made me shudder. I didn't find it funny at all. He stayed for an hour and a half, got 3 courses, and drank 2 bottles of wine. He left a decent tip. Even as he left, he watched me. He had to practically walk backward to avoid breaking eye contact. After closing, all I could think about was the man. It had been busy all night, and I hadn't caught Casey until the end. She hadn't noticed him. Damn, I was hoping someone else had, to stop me from feeling so stupid. Over the next week, I didn't think much of it. Through uni work, other customers, and various events throughout the week, the guy who stared at me became just another weird customer I'd had. A story to be told during the after-close cigarette at work. That was until exactly a week later when the man was yet again sat in my section. This time, he wasn't alone. He'd brought a woman with him. She had curly hair that was unkempt just like his, huge bags under her eyes, and a tired expression. I noticed them before they noticed me. I was glad that he wasn't alone this time. I initially thought that the woman being there might preoccupy him and stop him from staring. I was wrong. As I bounded up to their table after a deep breath, my heart sank. The woman caught sight of me and looked at me in shock and horror. She pulled the same strange expression that the man had pulled the first time and was pulling again. They stared at me in perfect unison. I took their drinks orders and rushed off, hearing inaudible whispering as I walked away. Something was not right. Keezy was working this time, and had the section closest to mine this time. I caught her in the kitchen and told her that he was back, and that the lady was doing the same thing. Sure enough, the behavior continued. As I took their food orders after delivering drinks, the woman tried to speak to me. "Chloe," she began softly, but the man grabbed her knee, not breaking eye contact with me. I wondered how she knew my name, but of course, during my initial scripted waitress greeting, I told them my name. Not many customers remember it, though, and the restaurant was fairly high-end, so we don't wear name badges. They were paying attention. It made me edgy. The man proceeded to interrupt her with his order, ordering for her as well. I never like it when people order for their partner. It seems a little archaic. I didn't stick around, but the whisper seemed more pointed this time. They stayed for 2 hours this time. The man continued to stare at me as he had the week before, and the woman zigzagged between staring at me in the same fashion and presumably powdering her nose. In the ladies' room, she came back more twitchy each time, and it would have accounted for the bags under her eyes. Again, they left a generous tip, but it did nothing to subside the feeling of deep unease. At close, Keezy told me she'd noticed it too. She said it had been creepy, the way they'd looked at me. It may sound like a huge overreaction, but neither of them took eyes off me, unless I removed myself from their vision. It was nice to know someone had seen it. They returned the next week, and the next, and the one after that. I tried to swap shifts, but I couldn't do it around my uni work, and I tried to swap sections. One of the nights Keezy served their table for me, and even as they told her their drinks orders, they watched me. It was like no one else in the room was present to them. I had complained to the manager, but he just laughed it off. He couldn't speak to customers about simply looking at one of his staff members, as he put it. After a few weeks, the guy started making more lone visits at random times of the week. He would come for drinks and something small to eat. If I wasn't on shift, he wouldn't stay long. The manager would even joke to me when I came to work that my boyfriend had been in and run home because I wasn't there. The chefs found it hilarious. No one realized how much it frightened me. They started showing up everywhere, just shopping in the same stores as me, walking past me in the street, taking the same buses I did to different stops each time. I only ever saw them for a flash, or it was too crowded for me to stop them and ask them why they were following me. One night recently, I could have sworn I saw the woman staring into my window from across the road on campus. As I picked up my phone to call the police and looked up, she was gone. I sobbed that night, conflicted between genuine terror and the concern that I was reading so deeply into nothing. After seeing the woman out of the window, I started carrying a rape alarm. I just wanted something loud enough in case I was ever grabbed. This couple seemed so fixated on me that I felt vulnerable all the time. I didn't know whether to call the police or not. I had no real evidence and they hadn't done anything wrong. Can someone be arrested for making you uncomfortable? Every week I dreaded that shift, the one I knew they'd be there for. My rape alarm didn't make me feel much safer. The tip was no longer worth it. I was starting to lose my sanity over this. This weekend was just gone. I was dreading it more than ever. I had seen them a total of 12 times throughout the week, and who knows how many times they were watching without me knowing. That same sad but happy expression that they pull every time. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the sleeping pills I've been taking to help with it. More than likely, it was the fact that Keezy was away for the weekend, and I didn't have a lift home that night. Whatever it was, something convinced me to pack a knife in my purse that night. Despite what happened, I'm still glad I did. As expected, the couple came for their weekly booking. I didn't serve them. The best I could get out of the manager was to at least serve them himself, so that I didn't have to. They stared at me the entire time, as they always do. The lady kept pulling something out of her pocket and looking at it under the table. The man occasionally broke his gaze to look at whatever she had in her hands, and then back at me. It seemed to surprise him every time. Their food came and went, and they left, the woman rustling something in her pocket as they walked out of the building. They walked straight past me, and I only caught 4 words from the man to the woman as they left. Not yet, but tonight. It sent shivers down my spine. There was no one here that could take me home. All the other closers stayed much later than I did for kitchen and cashing up, and I knew when I left I was on my own. I knew they were going to do something to me. I was so glad I'd packed that knife. Even if this whole situation was making me feel paranoid, at least I had some protection. I finished my clothes and the time rolled around to leave. I could feel my hands shaking and my palms sweating as I started to make my way down the road towards the bus stop. Every shadow made me twitch. It was quiet out. The shops were all closed, and there weren't many people around, just the occasional car going past. I could feel footsteps behind me, and I knew they were following. I kept a hand inside my bag, ready to grab hold of the knife if I needed it. When I sat down at the bus stop, I finally began to see the outlines of 2 figures approaching me. I wasn't going to give them any time to harm me. I ran as fast as I could. They kept up well, considering their ages and respectively tired faces. I thought they were going to catch me until I darted across the road. The last thing I heard was the lady scream the name Harley. Then, there was a large bang, and the whole sound around me went numb. That doesn't make much sense, but I don't know how else to explain it. Everything had this dull, muffled feeling to it, like the world was going in slow motion. I turned around to see the mangled bodies of my stalkers, laid out in front of the bus that had abruptly broken after hitting them. Bones were jutting out of bloodied rips in their flesh. The expression hadn't left their eyes, though, and somehow it still looked like they were staring at me. I ran towards the wreckage, and ran to the couple to check for pulses as the horrified bus driver got out of his vehicle. As I checked the woman over, I felt a crunching in her pocket, and quickly grabbed the contents. 2 folded up, wrinkled bits of paper, and without looking at them, shoved them in my bag, while I continued to give futile CPR. The couple were dead. I gave my statement to the police, told the paramedics what had happened, and tried to explain to the bus driver that I was being followed, and it hadn't been his fault. They ran out in front of him. It seemed like hours before they finally let me go home. As I collapsed into my bed, I remembered the pieces of paper that I'd stuffed in my bag, and got them out. I unfolded and smoothed them out, and gasped at the contents. One was an article from 20 years ago, in a national newspaper. The headline read, "We named her Harley," the story of the couple whose baby was stolen from the womb. The photo showed the couple, holding baby girl clothes and looking devastated. The article explained that the woman had spent a lot of time recovering in hospital from the forced C-section at 8 months. She was only alive due to the evident surgical knowledge of the unknown attackers who had broken into their home and performed it while her husband worked away. The second piece of paper confirmed my worst fears. It was a printed photograph of what appeared to be the lady's mother, with unruly blonde curls to her shoulders, and the face, a mirror image of mine. This morning, the newspapers reported the identities of the victims and mentioned their past tragedies. My parents keep calling to see how I'm doing after the incident. I thought I was scared of the couple, but that was nothing compared to how terrified I am now every time that phone rings. Story 3. I'm a park ranger, and something is stalking the local hikers. I'm a park ranger, but I'm leaving my name and the name of the park out of this post intentionally. The names of all those involved have been changed as well. I needed to get this story out there, but cannot rely on conventional avenues. That's why I'm posting it here. I could lose my job or much worse, but this story has to be told. I owe it to Catherine, not her real name. I arrived at the ranger station like any other day. I was given my section of the park to patrol. Unfortunately, the park is massive and my section usually includes half of it, so there isn't much chance for leisurely strolls on the trails. I hopped in my work vehicle, a 10-year-old 4x4, and headed out to see if anyone needed assistance. It didn't take long to find someone. At the first campground, there was a man who couldn't get his camper started. A quick jump got him rolling along. Next was a couple needing directions, then an overturned canoe. I had only made it a few miles through the park. I was going to have to move if I hoped to make a full route today. I managed to grab a few quick bites of lunch and put some miles on without anyone needing help when the call came over the radio. There was a hiker that found something, and I needed to go check it out. A half hour later, I was talking to a middle-aged woman who had made a concerning discovery. She found a hat and a note on the trail. I read the note. I'm writing this note and leaving it behind because I'm not sure what's happening. The 5 of us friends have been planning this trip forever, even since long before we graduated. But it always seemed like something came up at the last minute and one or more of us couldn't go. For a while, I was almost convinced that some outside force was working against us. That we were cursed not to go camping together until we were all too old to enjoy it. I could picture Devin now. He would still go even if he was so old he had to use a walker on the trail. He's always up for camping. I think the guy carries a loaded backpack in his car with him everywhere he goes. LOL. Adrienne got here right behind us, followed soon after by Dean. Of course, Terry was the last one to show. We started up the trail in great spirits. 3 miles and the sun was just starting to heat up. We were making good time towards the rustic campground when Devin decided to take a detour. He said he'd heard about an old trail that no one used anymore and wanted to check it out. I said we should keep going the way we were, but I was outvoted. I honestly don't think Terry's vote should have counted since he was obviously stoned, and Devin just bullied him into saying yes. We came to a spot with a large stone off to the side of the trail. Devin said it was the trailhead, but I didn't see any trail. He led us through some heavy brush, but on the other side it cleared out, and we could see the faint impression of an overgrown trail. I went last, and left my hat on the stone in case we got lost and needed to be rescued. I think that's exactly where we're heading, straight toward Lost. I'll leave this note under my hat and hope that someone finds us. I asked the woman to show me where she'd found it, and she showed me. 3 miles later, I was staring at the rock I hoped I would never see again. I radioed my location to the station and told them if they didn't hear from me in a couple of hours, to send a search party to the old abandoned trail. I wished I would have brought my supplies with me, my backpack, and my sidearm, but they were 3 miles away, and I didn't know how long these kids had been on this trail. I knew that wasted time could mean the difference between life and death. At least I had my knife, flashlight, and binoculars. So I thanked the woman, placed the red hat back on the stone just in case, and headed into the heavy brush. Once through the initial overgrowth, the trail became visible. Old memories flashed through my head, ones I never wanted to think of again. I took a deep breath and headed down the trail. It was overgrown for the first mile or so, and then it opened up into a field. I could see people had walked through before me, by the way the weeds were partially trampled. As I walked through, a deer jumped ahead of me, startling me. Until that moment, I didn't realize how jumpy I was. I tried to settle down and tell myself that these kids were just lost, and I could catch up to them and get them out. Telling myself that didn't make the memories go away. I entered a clearing with a fallen log and another note with a rock sitting on it. I think I'm being silly. This trail isn't so bad. Maybe I was wrong. Devin seems to know where he's going. I just can't shake this feeling that we're being watched. Sometimes I'll look around, and I swear I see a face disappear behind a tree. Am I being paranoid? Maybe if the birds would start singing again, that would lighten my mood. But I haven't heard a bird or any other animal for a while. I wonder why they're being so quiet. Are they afraid of us? On another note, Terry seems to be brooding more than usual. Maybe he forgot to bring enough of his stash to last the trip. Devin is in his glory, since everyone has to rely on him for directions. Adrienne and Dean seem to be along for the ride, although I have noticed Dean looking around at the trees as well. Maybe I'll ask him if he sees anything. If you're trying to track us down, I hope we aren't being too much bother. I just have this feeling. I folded the note and stuck it in my pocket, then prayed she was wrong about being followed. I pushed on, beginning to miss my backpack with the supplies in it, especially the water bottles. The trees provided some shade, so the sunlight wasn't shining directly on me. But hiking is always thirsty work. The birds chirping in the trees made me almost forget about the desperate mission I was on to save these 5 kids. My mind wandered back to the kid I couldn't save. It had been shortly after I started as a park ranger. An 11-year-old boy had gotten lost on this very trail. His parents searched frantically for him before calling us in to look. I remember hoping to be the one to find him, as we formed search parties and searched on, in, and around every inch of the trail. In the end, I got my wish. I found him, but I wish I hadn't. I pushed the memory to the back of my mind and focused on the trail. It was starting to fade. The trampling of feet wasn't making enough of a difference, and I was starting to lose my way. Out here, that can be deadly. I kept moving forward, and finally regained the trail just in time to reach the fork. I looked back and forth from one choice to the other, and couldn't see a difference between the two. I searched for any broken twigs or plants that would give me a hint, but there were none. Just when I was about to give up and flip a coin, I saw a piece of paper in the weeds, barely visible. I dug it out and read it. It seems like we have a dilemma. A fork in the road, as it were. You would think I would be happy to see the doubt in Devin's eyes as he looked from one choice to the other, but you'd be wrong. It made my confidence plummet. It made me think that we were never getting out of here. Everyone's running out of water, Devin yelled at us for not conserving, but I saw him drink the last of his too. He ranted and raved at us for a while, but we all knew that he was just mad because he didn't know what to do. In the end, he flipped a coin. We all did our best not to laugh. Adrienne is reaching the end of her rope with Devin and his attitude. Dean has been playing peacemaker, trying to keep them from going at it too much. Terry has been way too quiet. I haven't seen him light up once. Something's up with him, but every time I ask, he says it's nothing. The birds still aren't singing, and it's starting to really bother me. The strange feeling I have hasn't gone away. I asked Dean if he had seen anything strange, but he won't talk about it. We've been on this trail for a while. I'm hoping to come to the end soon. By the way, in case the note got moved or blown around, we took the left trail. I was panicked by the end of reading that note, and so relieved she mentioned which trail to take. I radioed in and reported that I was on the trail of the missing hikers. I mentioned the fork and taking the left side. I was told that there was no search party going on yet, that I was the only one looking for these kids. It was the complete opposite of years ago looking for that kid. Everyone was searching. I know we combed every inch of that wilderness, but that's the thing about the woods. You can search every nook and cranny, but something can still stay hidden. The sun was going down, and I still had no idea how close I was to catching up to these kids. I could stumble across them in the next clearing, or they could be hours ahead of me. I met with the woman who showed me the hat and note in the afternoon. If they started out around daybreak, they could be a good 5 or 6 hours ahead of me. If the leader is so driven to continue, it's hard to say how far they might be. I continued following the trail until I came to a fallen tree across a river. I looked both ways along the edge of the water, but saw no trail, so I made my way across the tree. I could picture the debate the kids had when they got here. I chuckled at the thought of Devin having to convince them to go across. I believe I made up a lot of time with that single crossing. I jumped down to the water and drank my fill, then climbed back up feeling much better. It was tough to pick up the trail on the other side. I was glad to find a note sticking to a branch. Oh my gosh, Devin just about came unglued when we got to that tree over the river. He hopped up on it right away and started across. But the rest of us weren't so sure the trail led that way. We asked him how a trail could be planned with a fallen tree as part of it. He sputtered and stomped and told us how lost we'd be without him. Dean had finally had enough and told him we were lost because of him. I seriously thought Devin was going to take a swing at him until Terry, of all people, came to his side and told Devin to shut up. The rest of us all came together and told Devin he could keep leading us as long as he stopped acting like a petty tyrant. He didn't take it well. In the end, he told us we could all go to hell. He sat on the log and refused to move. Eventually, after we took a break and refilled our water bottles in the river, Dean said we should get going and led us across the tree. Devin followed along, acting like a whipped puppy. Dean and I talked about the disappearing face we'd seen a while back, but neither of us had seen it again. At least the birds are back to singing. I chuckled, figuring that Devin would be a big baby over the whole thing. But after the chuckle came concern. Deposed leaders are usually dangerous. I wondered how much offense Devon had taken, and if he would be looking to get some payback in some small or large way. Darkness was coming on fast in the woods. I had to make a decision. Camp for the night, or keep going. If I camped, I could defend against the predators that lurked in the darkness. But if I kept moving, there was a good chance I could stumble across the group before daybreak. It wasn't much of a decision. These kids that I didn't even know, that I had plunged headfirst into the woods without even my backpack of supplies. Of course, I was going to try to catch up with them. If I had done that years back, would that kid still be alive? Such thoughts nagged at me. Most days I kept them at bay, but here in this same forest, close to the spot where I found him, I needed to focus. If I'm going to keep after them, then I need to get going. I stepped off the trail to take a piss and heard a metallic snap. At the same time, I felt intense pain shoot up my leg. I looked down, and I had stepped into a bear trap. I screamed, fell to the ground, and rocked back and forth in agony. After a few minutes, I focused on getting the trap off my leg. I found a branch and pried the trap open, screaming the entire time. I managed to pull the trap off my leg and threw it to the side. I really didn't want to take my boot off, but I had to see the damage. It took every ounce of effort I could muster to unlace the boot and pull it off. My leg was purple. I felt along the wound very gently, but there didn't seem to be any break. That didn't mean I wasn't going to be limping for the next month. But it did mean I would buy this brand of boots for the rest of my life. It took much more effort and some more screaming to put the boot back on. But I knew I needed to keep moving. I laced up the boot and found a sturdy branch to use as a crutch. I struggled to my feet and took my first few ginger steps. Once I got into a rhythm, it got easier, but I couldn't walk as fast as I had been. Of course, when I was at my weakest was when I heard footsteps in the trees close to me. I knew there was a predator around, just because it could sense I was vulnerable. I leaned against a tree and held my crutch ready as a weapon. The footsteps came closer. They paused as if they knew I was ready, then slowly continued stalking me. They were deliberate but slow. Each step seemed measured, as if waiting for the right moment to strike. I heard it right next to the tree I was hiding behind. I whipped around as best I could and raised my crutch to strike. A deer stared at me for a heartbeat and then turned and ran through the forest. I collapsed against the tree and slid down to the ground, allowing the adrenaline to bleed off. I don't remember falling asleep. I woke to sandpaper scraping the side of my face. I opened my eyes, and there was a bear beside me, licking my cheek. I freaked out, screamed, and rolled away from it. The bear wasn't ready for that reaction. It startled and ran away. I slowed my rapid breathing and looked around. It was dark. There were thin shafts of moonlight beaming through the trees, providing a little light. I checked my watch, and it was nearly 4 a.m. I rose slowly and gingerly on my injured ankle, took the small flashlight out of my pocket, and prayed it still worked. My prayers were answered when the beam shone brightly through the woods. I panned around trying to get my bearings. After a moment, I found the trail and started hobbling toward it. The nightly noises were a comfort. At least, if the crickets were chirping and the rest of the forest was singing its nightly tune, that meant predators weren't around. I stumbled and fell, hitting my injured ankle against a rock. The pain overwhelmed me and I screamed. After a few minutes of recovery, I got up and continued at a slower pace, paying more attention to the ground. I chided myself for falling asleep and losing so much time. At least the trail was easy to follow. I continued on through the night, hoping I wasn't too late. I started thinking about the boy I'd failed to rescue, and what would happen if I failed to rescue these kids. I'm sure the Rangers department would say I did my best. I wasn't worried about them. It was me. Would I be able to forgive myself for letting something happen again? My thoughts were interrupted when I stumbled into a clearing. Not just any clearing. There were the remnants of a fire. There were impressions from tent pegs being pulled out of the ground. All around were the signs of a very recent campsite, including a tent that was still set up. I got so excited I nearly fell over my crutch, looking around for signs of anything. The tent was a mixed blessing. It was very ominous that it was still here while the others were gone, but I was able to find some supplies to take along for my search. The most important was food. I shoved some protein bars in my pocket while devouring some beef jerky. I also grabbed 2 bottles of water from the pack. I stumbled across a note sitting under a rock beside the smoldering fire. Before I sat, I held my hand out to the fire. It was still warm, but the embers were nearly dead. It had been hours since it was first lit. If I hadn't taken my unintentional nap, I would have caught up with them. There was nothing I could do but sit by the dying fire and read the note, hoping there was good news. We found this clearing and decided to camp. Everyone was tired from walking, and the mood was somber because no one seemed to know where we were. All of us had been hiking in this forest before, but none of us had ever seen or heard of this trail. We set up our tents and started a fire, then had some supper and sat around. No one really felt like talking, so I tried to get the ball rolling by asking Terry why he was late. He hesitated, but at my prompting eventually, he told us that he had hit an animal with his car on the way here. I asked if it was a deer, and he said no. It was much too big to be a deer. He said it walked upright on 2 legs, and it was massive, like 8 feet tall, covered in brown hair. He swerved to miss it, but the strangest thing was it seemed to try to jump in front of him anyway, like it wanted him to stop. We all listened with rapt attention. Just then, off in the distance, we heard a scream. We all froze. Devin started spouting off and yelling at Terry for trying to scare us. Then he stormed off. Dean tried to stop him, but he pushed him away and disappeared in the woods. The rest of us talked, trying to decide if we should go look for him, but in the end, we figured we should just let him go and cool off. A short while later, we heard a rustling off in the distance, and a muffled cry. We huddled a little closer together and went on high alert. Our eyes darted back and forth as we searched the impenetrable wall of trees surrounding us, looking for any sign of a predator. Right then, the strangest thing happened. All the nightly noises stopped. The crickets, the squirrels, the owls, every sound that you usually hear in the forest at night simply ceased. It was unnerving. For a moment, I wondered if I hadn't gone deaf. Our eyes darted all around in the darkness. We all huddled closer to the fire. Dean pulled out his hunting knife. None of us said a word. It was like if we spoke, something bad would happen. Somehow, whatever caused the noises to stop would find us if we spoke. Someone did speak, though. Just not who we expected. "Why are you here?" came a raspy, deep voice that seemed to echo from everywhere. We looked all around, and finally, a man stepped into the light. He was large, well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, and older, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He was also wearing a park ranger's uniform. It looked old and shabby, like he had been wearing it for a long time. There were no name tag or park patches. At that point, we didn't care. We had been rescued. We clamored around him, saying how glad we were that he had found us. We told him about going on the trail, and how we weren't sure where we even were. The man listened, then slowly said, "You shouldn't be here." We all looked at each other. I'm sure the others thought the same as me. "No shit, we shouldn't be here. We just told you that." He continued to look at us from one to the other, as though sizing us up. I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with his silence. I would have thought he would offer to guide us, but he didn't. He kept staring. I think everyone else was getting a little edgy as well, when Dean asked if he could point us in the right direction. He looked at Dean as if deciding to answer him or not. "I can guide you," he said, "but first you should have some rest." We all agreed that the day had been long and stressful. We decided to take his advice and turn in. We offered him some food and water, but he refused, saying he wasn't hungry. We each went to our tents and laid down. Before I settled in and finished this note, I popped my head back out of my tent to check on our guide. He was sitting by the fire, staring into the orange coals. I thought I heard him mumbling or maybe humming something softly. I quietly zipped up my tent and went to sleep. Sometime later, someone banged on my tent. I woke and unzipped it to find the ranger with a strange look in his eyes. "We need to go." "Why?" I said, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. "It's not safe here," he said, with an edge of panic in his voice. I popped back into my tent to change, then came out and met with everyone. They were all in states of semi-consciousness as well. Everyone but the ranger seemed to be confused. "Pack up. We need to leave," he said a little more forcefully. I was about to protest when I heard a piercing scream in the distance. His head shot up and he stared in the direction of the sound. "Move it," he said. "Pack up." We didn't need to be told again. The scream brought us all fully awake. We tore down our tents in record time and packed everything into our backpacks. As I was finishing up, I noticed Devon's tent was still up. "Where's Devon?" I said. "Who's Devon?" the ranger said. "He's another one of our friends," I said. "He went off into the woods alone right before you got here." "He didn't come back," the ranger said. "Should we go look for him?" I said. The ranger extended his arms and did a slow circle. "Which way would you go?" he said. I understood his point. How would we know where he had gone? If he was still on the path or not? It just seemed like we should do something. "What about his gear?" I said. "Do we take it with us?" The ranger looked at me like he was annoyed at having to answer such questions. "Leave it here in case he comes back," he said. "He'll need his supplies." I'm not sure if I'll keep leaving notes or not, now that we have the ranger to guide us. Whoever finds this, please look for Devon and make sure he's okay. A ranger. All the rangers at this park are in their 30s or 40s. Maybe it was someone who retired and was just roaming around out there. But why would he be in a ranger outfit? Sitting here by the dying embers of the fire, with a tent set up in front of me, it was very tempting to take a rest. If they're in the hands of a capable ranger, I could get some rest before the long hike back out of here. But I knew I had already taken my rest for the night. If not for that, I would have been here hours ago, probably before the other ranger. I set out again, feeling tired but determined. The campsite made me more hopeful than I had been all day. At least they were together and thinking like campers. If only I knew who this ranger was. The sun was an hour away from rising, so I took out my flashlight to follow the trail. I zipped up the tent before I left, just in case its owner did come back. Wouldn't want animals getting in and taking everything. It's bad enough when injured park rangers do it. The trail stayed level for a while as dawn peeked over the trees. The trail started heading upward, which was bad news for me and my bum ankle. It made things harder, but I had my trusty makeshift crutch to help me. Dawn crept into the forest, giving me a little assistance. At least I wouldn't have to waste a hand holding a flashlight. As the climb grew steeper, the trail grew more narrow. At times, it was only the width of 1 foot. I held onto trees, and whatever I could as I scaled the extremely narrow trail. At the most difficult, I paused and seriously considered turning back. As I looked around for any other way to keep going, I saw brightly colored fabric at the bottom of the ravine. I carefully balanced as I took out my binoculars and looked. It was a backpack, and attached to it was the body of a girl in her early 20s. She looked like she had hit her head on the rocks at the bottom. Her face was bloody and mauled. Her clothes were ripped and soaked in blood. There was no doubt an animal had gotten to her. The only question was she alive when it started feeding on her? I looked away, but felt my determination double to find these missing kids. They might be with a ranger, but they were still in terrible danger. I slowly continued up the narrow trail. At times, I was sure the ground would give out from under me, and I would share the same fate as the poor, unfortunate girl at the bottom of the ravine. It was then I remembered my radio. I tried to call in and report the location of the body, but the only response I got was static. I determined to try again when I got to the top of the trail. It was yet another motivation to keep going, to be careful, to survive. It seemed like hours at a snail's pace, working my way up the side of that ravine. Finally, I clawed my way over the edge to the top. I rolled over onto solid ground and lay there for a few minutes. Once I caught my breath, I got up slowly and painfully. I hadn't done my ankle any favors. I limped toward what looked like the trail and began following. It wasn't long before I came across the remnants of another campsite. The fire was a little warmer than the last one. I stoked it up, threw some more wood on, and got it going. I knew I needed some rest. I searched around and found a note, then sat down on a log by the fire to read it. I can't believe Adrienne's gone. We started up this steep ravine, and the trail kept getting more narrow. I asked the ranger if there was any other way around. but he just glared at me and said no. We all struggled with our heavy packs on our backs. At one point, I was on all fours just trying to keep from sliding into the ravine. That's when it happened. Adrienne was having trouble keeping her feet on the trail. She kept slipping. I reached out and helped her balance a few times. Being right in front of me, I kept an eye on her whenever I could. That wasn't nearly as much as I wanted, because I was watching my own feet. She slipped once, and I tried to grab her, but she had tipped over, and the weight of her backpack dragged her over the side. I watched in horror as she tumbled down into the ravine, bouncing off trees as she went. I saw her skull make a solid impact several times as she tumbled to the bottom and slid to a stop. I couldn't see if she was still breathing or not as I called her name. She didn't move. I called for the ranger in front of us and pointed to her unmoving body. He stared at her for a long time. I don't know if he was trying to see if she was alive or not. He told us to keep going up the trail to the top, and he would go check on her. I watched as he carefully made his way down the nearly sheer slope. We kept moving forward as instructed. He was only halfway down when we made it to the top. I was a wreck. I was so happy we made it, but sad for Adrienne. I didn't hold out much hope that the ranger was going to come trotting into camp with her on his back, saying she only had a few bumps and bruises. We started a fire, and then sat around it in a stupor. Finally, Terry came over and talked to me. "Look, I understand she was your friend, but she was ours too," he said. "We need to work together to get out of here. For them." "That's so stupid, it makes sense," I said, with the remnants of a smile. It was then the ranger reappeared. He sat by the fire and didn't say a word. There was something in his eyes. It wasn't sadness, but I don't know exactly what it was. We knew she wasn't coming back. We rested for a little while, then started out on the trail again. If you're following us, I hope you're being careful. Stay safe. Wow. This girl is something else. With all she's gone through, she still wants me to be safe. I hope I find her. I think she'd make a good ranger. My guilty conscience jumped up on my back and yelled at me, "How can you sit around and rest when that poor girl just lost her friend and needs your help?" I knew it was right. I just didn't know why that other ranger was being so careless. I struggled to get up, kicked out the fire, and started after them. The daylight was dimming, but it was only 8 in the morning. I looked up and saw why. Storm clouds were so overtaking the sky. Yet another reason I wish I would have brought my backpack. The raindrops hit like a cold slap in the face. Even though it was still September, out here in the mountains, the weather can change in a heartbeat. We weren't at the top of the mountain, but in the middle was enough for the weather change to make me shiver. Now that we were out of the ravine, I tried my radio again, but it was just static. I knew there were some places where the radio inexplicably wouldn't work. I just hoped to get away from the interference before it was too late. The trail was clear in front of me, but that was little comfort when walking in open fields with no rain cover. All those trees I tromped through, and now in the rain, I have wide open spaces. I'd say someone doesn't like me. The rain didn't just pass like a spring shower. It poured so hard it became difficult to see in front of me. For a long time, I trudged through the rain. At times, it felt like I was walking in place. The mud was starting to cake on my boots. And then my salvation appeared. In front of me on the trail was a tent. I called out before I unzipped the tent and let myself in. I flopped to the wonderful dry floor, then quickly turned and zipped the entrance back up. I breathed a sigh of relief, but as I did, a stench assaulted my nose. I looked over at the sleeping bag. It was full. "I'm sorry to barge in like this, but I needed to get out of the rain," I said. No response. I nudged the person in the bag. It tipped to the side and rocked right back. That's when I noticed the splotches of red that had soaked through the bag. I didn't want to see, but I pulled the top of the sleeping bag away from the person's face. The bad part was they no longer had a face. It had been ripped away, and the neck had been gouged out. There were large wounds on the body as well. I tried to feel for a pulse, but when my fingers went straight into the muscles of the neck, I figured there was no pulse to feel. I wiped my fingers on the sleeping bag and pondered why this person was covered. I know the animal who did this didn't gently cover up the person with a sleeping bag when it was done. I found my answer laying above the head of the person. It was a note. I can't believe Terry's dead. I wish I'd never come on this trip. I wish I'd never let Devin bully us into turning down this damn trail. Where the hell is Devin anyway? When he stormed off on his little pity party, did he run across whatever creature has been stalking us? Is he sitting back in his tent now enjoying himself? I really don't know. We were enjoying not climbing up the face of a ravine, but we were very tired. I mentioned stopping and camping for a little bit to the ranger. He looked around and even sniffed the air. That seemed like a weird thing to do. But after that, he agreed to let us set up camp. He even told us to do it as quickly as we could. We gathered wood for a fire, but he told us not to bother, because the rain was coming. I guess that explains the sniffing the air thing. Our tents had been up maybe 15 minutes when it started raining. It quickly turned into a downpour. We all offered the ranger to sit in our tents with us. He looked over us one by one. It was kind of creepy. Finally, he said he would sit with Terry in his tent. Dean and I looked at each other with relieved expressions. The ranger is helping us, but he isn't someone I'd like to ever see again. He just acts too weird. At times, I wonder if he's really helping. I just closed my eyes, listening to the rain on the tent and letting it carry me off to dreamland, when the ranger ripped open my tent. He said we needed to pack up and leave right now. That something was hunting us. We dove out into the rain and miserably packed our tents. He reassured us that there was a cave nearby, and we could get shelter there. As I was packing up, I didn't see Terry, so I went over to his tent and knocked. When there was no answer, I went in and found what was left of his body. Something had torn him to shreds. I covered my mouth to keep from vomiting and ran out to tell the others. Dean and the ranger looked in and saw that there was no helping him. The ranger said he had left the tent to go to the bathroom, and when he came back he saw a predator hanging around the tents. That's when he came and woke us. It must have already gotten to Terry. I pulled his sleeping bag over his head and wished we had time to give him a proper burial. But the ranger said the animal might be back for the rest of us, so we quickly packed and left. I barely had time to finish this note. Please help us. A cave. What kind of ranger is he? Doesn't he realize that would be the most likely place a large predator would call home? I thought for a moment what cave he could be talking about. I hadn't been on this trail for 5 years, ever since I found the kid here. Then it hit me. We were very close to the place where we found him. Why would he take them there? Unless... I jumped up so quickly that I nearly fell on top of the body when I forgot and put too much weight on my injured ankle. I hobbled out of the tent and went as quickly as I could toward the place I swore I'd never see again. I approached the cave, and my heart sank. 2 backpacks sat just inside the entrance. I pulled out my knife and flashlight, then cautiously peeked inside. I felt a change in the breeze, and turned to find the ranger staring at me. I looked him up and down. "You," I said. "The last time I saw you was when we found the boy." He said nothing. "It was never a random animal attack," I said. "It was you." He took a step toward me. "Of course it was," he said. "How wonderful was it to watch you years ago, as you floundered around looking for some predator that stood beside you." "You son of a bitch." I pulled out my knife and held it ready. He paused, then smiled. "Do you really think that knife can hurt me?" I looked at it. "Pretty sure," I said. "It's made of iron." His smile vanished. "So you do know what I am." I pulled out a bottle of brown water. "I made sure to grab some runoff from the rainstorm," I said. "It might not do as good as rust water, but let's find out." I opened the bottle and threw some water at him. He dodged it as though it was acid. At the same time, I swung with the knife. He dodged with ease. "Why don't you turn into the big pussy that you are?" I said, taunting him. "Because we both know when I transform I'm vulnerable for a moment," he said. "And I'm sure you would love to take advantage of a vulnerable moment." He swung and connected with my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I recovered and swung the knife in a vicious downswing at him, which he easily dodged. I kept moving forward, stabbing and slashing at him. I couldn't get close enough to connect. He was too fast. "You can't defeat me," he said. "Look at you. Like an injured deer just waiting to be devoured." "Be quiet, Yinald Lushi," I yelled. At the mention of his name, he froze. I knew I didn't have much time. I took advantage of the moment, lunging at him with my knife. If I had been uninjured, I would have closed the distance between us with 2 quick steps and buried the knife in his heart. Unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, I forgot about my injured ankle. I stepped forward on my good leg, then faltered when I tried to put weight on the injured one. Instead of burying the knife in his heart, it went through his left thigh. He screamed in pain and ran out of the cave. I took out my flashlight and started toward the back of the cave. There I found a mutilated body next to a pile of bones. There was a note in her hand. I sat down, took it, and read. I can't believe how stupid I was not to see this much sooner. All the time guiding us was just a ploy. He never wanted to help us. He never cared about any of us or our safety. I need to write this quickly before he comes back. The ranger led us here and told us to wait, that we'd be safe in the cave. He left us alone. Dean pulled out his flashlight and explored deeper into the cave. He found a large pile of bones. Off to the side of them was a pile of clothes. We ran toward the opening, but the ranger had returned. "So, you didn't listen," he said, leering at us. "I told you to stay here, not explore my home." "What are you?" I said. He smiled for the first time since I'd met him, but his smile wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. I watched in horror as he changed into a giant cat creature. It didn't look quite like a panther or mountain lion. He lunged at us with amazing speed. He grabbed my leg and tore a large gash in it. I fell to the floor screaming. Dean tried to defend me, swinging his knife around and holding it at bay, but it stalked around him and cornered him. He only had one chance. He looked at me with sadness in his eyes, and then ran past the creature and out of the cave. It looked at me, and my leg then sprinted out after Dean. I know why he did it. He was trying to give me time to escape, but with my leg, there was no way I could outrun that thing. What he actually did was give me time to say goodbye. If you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I led you to your death. If you do somehow survive and make it out of here, please tell our families what really happened here. Goodbye. I fought back tears as I read the final words of this brave girl. I limped to the front of the cave and looked out as the rain stopped. It was like seeing a new world being born. I tried my radio and got an immediate answer. I gave them my GPS coordinates and told them to prepare for casualties. I'm still a park ranger even months later. I made sure that the trail was sealed off. I carry an iron knife and rust water with me at all times. I carry the rust water in a squirt gun just in case. The bones were removed from the cave and subjected to DNA testing. Aside from this group of victims, including Devin, there were several other people who had gone missing in the park over the years. The official version of the events was that a rogue animal had been hunting people. I was told it would be best for my career if I didn't reveal the true nature of the predator. I still search for the creature and post signs everywhere to be on the lookout for an older ranger wearing a uniform with no patches on it. There's a number to call if anyone spots him. It's my personal cell phone number. From time to time, I hear reports of a large cat that's limping on its hind leg. I try to make my way to that spot as quickly as possible, but I have yet to catch him. I posted this story in memory of that brave girl, but also as a warning. Never go on an unposted trail, and beware of those you meet in the woods, even if they wear a uniform. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe to Morbid Mentality, and leave any feedback or thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Until next time, take care.